Hi guys, and welcome to tonight's Music Tech webinar. Tonight we're going to be discussing ADT and double tracking. Now, this is a fantastic technique and it's so simple to use. These techniques have been around since like 1950s and even before really. But I think it's really important as part of our effects series to really cover these and kind of have a look at how they've affected the way in which we record and how we produce music. So that's what we're going to do tonight. Let me just set this up a little bit. We're just getting going. So tonight during the Q&A section, if you want to ask some questions, please feel free to tweet us at MusicTech101 or use the Q&A or the discussion board here on Google Hangouts. We're going to be around approximately till about 8:30. So hopefully you can join us. Hopefully you've got some good questions and join the discussion. Now, what are we going to look at tonight? Firstly, what is ADT and double tracking? It's something that I use day to day when I'm recording, and I get my students to use it as much as possible. But even now, they don't really take full advantage of it. So we're just going to delve into what it is and why we should be using it. We're going to look at some of the common parameters. Then we're going to look at why use this recording method, how it's evolved, and that's really the important part of this whole process. The next thing, we're going to just do a little demonstration over in Logic Pro, and then we'll go to your Q&A. So what is ADT and double tracking? Now, double tracking was kind of a tape effect in the early days, where you'd basically run the same piece of audio for a second tape or a second track, enabling you to kind of double it up, and then you could slow the second track down or speed it up ever so slightly so that you could get this double tracking happening. Now, during the 1960s, Abbey Road studio engineers working on the Beatles session invented this technique. And I've got a couple of their tracks here. So the first one I'm going to play is the Beatles track, and I'm just going to play a few seconds of it. Now you'll hear this ADT on the guitar solo. Okay, so just give me 2 seconds while I set this up. So here we go. We're just coming just slightly before the chorus. See what you reckon. See if you can hear the doubling effect. And the idea with double tracking is to make the sound that much thicker. Okay, so to give it a bit more emphasis, a bit more impact. Okay. Okay, so you can hear that in the right speaker on that little solo there, or little riff, whatever you want to call it. And it's quite nice, and I mean it'd be nice to be able to play that without the riff, but we're going to do that in demonstration just so you guys can see how that kind of works. The next one I've got for this ADT example is the I'm Only Sleeping track. Now this time it's on the vocals, and John Lennon was phenomenal. Some people say it was an insecurity that he just wanted his vocals drowned in reverbs and delays and all kinds of things like that. And other people say, they were going really for this psychedelic kind of pushing the boundaries. I'm probably one of the second people. I really think that the reason they were doing this at this time is they wanted to see how far they could push it. So have a listen, see what you think. Now this comes in right at the beginning. There you go. Have a listen to this track. Wake up early in the morning, lift my head. I'm still yawning when I'm... Now you can tell that is ADT rather than double tracking because it's so perfect, and this kind of offset is so accurate. So there's no kind of wavering off of the notes you would get with double tracking. It's accurate, and there is just that kind of delay. And I think in many respects you can think of ADT as one of the first delay effects, really. And it does add that impact, and you'll quite often see people using ADT on their acoustic guitars. And what a common practice in modern days is that you double track or automatically double track the acoustic guitars, pound one hard left and one hard right, and it just gives you this kind of bouncy effect, which it's a really nice effect, and it just helps out fill the mix a little bit. Okay, so the next one we're going to look at, that was ADT, and that's basically automatic double tracking, and it's just this idea of taking one track, doubling it or copying it completely and then offsetting it by a certain amount of time, and sometimes even just kind of tuning the pitch. Now, during the tape days, that was a natural thing, because by slowing the tape down, you would obviously detune the pitch ever so slightly as well. Okay, so double tracking, the process this time is slightly different. So with double tracking, the idea was to re-record the same track, but rather than automatically doing it, you had to get your singer or your guitarist or whatever to re-record that track again. Okay, and this is a really good technique if you want to kind of thicken up your sound and give that natural kind of chorusy effect, I guess. This is a fantastic technique. It can also eliminate some of the problem areas with weaker vocals as well. So during the 1960s and 70s, a lot of vocalists, especially in the rock genre, were experimenting massively with triple tracking, quadruple tracking their vocals to get these really big, lush sounds. And the example I'm going to play for you here is Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. Now, it's not the easiest thing to hear, but you'll hear on the word die, you'll hear that he's singing two slightly different phrasing. So his phrasing is different, is changed ever so slightly. So I'll probably play it a couple of times just so you can hear it. So this happens at 4 minutes 20. So let me just get this working. It's slightly after that actually. So here we go. Listen for the keyword die and just see if you can hear that second vocal as well. So you think you can stop me and spit my eye? So you think you can love me and leave me to die? And can you hear that? It's almost like a harmony as such, but that's just a bit of double tracking on the same part. And he's just changed the phrasing ever so slightly. Let me play that. Let me play that for you guys one more time, just so you can hear it. And I mean, that's just typical, that kind of era where they were kind of experimenting massively with these effects, and double tracking was just had such a big impact on the recordings of the time. Okay. And once again, as I said about automatic double tracking being one of the first kind of delay effects, double tracking was kind of one of the first natural chorusy effects, and it does give you that kind of modulation, I guess. Okay. So the common parameters of these two techniques really it's very, very simple. And this is why I encourage my students to kind of do this a lot, because it is ridiculously simple. The common parameters of an ADT is basically record a part, copy it in your DAW, so in Logic or Cubase or whatever, just do an instant copy onto another track, and then use the tools normally located in the left-hand side, and I'll show you where they are in Logic in just a second, just to offset the delay. And once again, you can offset the pitch as well if you want to, and I'll show you how to do that. Now, like I said before, one of the common techniques of ADT is actually panning one hard left and one hard right. So that's interesting. Well, I'll show you that one in a second as well. So the thing with double tracking, where it's different from ADT, is it does require an almost perfect replica of the original voice or instrument. And then these two parts are blended together. So you are trying to find that balance between the two parts. But this technique is really good for a few things. Once again, it's both of these techniques are good for making the actual sound just a lot bigger. Okay, but where double tracking is slightly better, say for instance on the first track, you ramped up a bit too long. So where the kind of attack kind of was a bit slow or something, and it's, oh god, that phrasing is slightly out, you could use the second track to make that phrasing right. And it's the same with the cutoff. If you come off slightly too early on a note, so say for instance you're singing the word off and you're meant to be going off, but you only sing off, well, you can use the second off to kind of compensate for the first one. And then there's obviously intonation issues where you can kind of almost correct the pitch. If you were kind of wobbly on one of the notes, you could kind of correct that with the second take. So that's where double tracking is really useful, and it can cover up a lot of mistakes and insecurities and inaccuracies and make it sound so much bigger, like we just saw on that Queen Bohemian Rhapsody track, where you basically got Freddie Mercury just singing ever so slightly different phrasing, and that kind of made it sound so much thicker. And And you know, well, this is brilliant. So that's how it works. Once again, ridiculously simple. So you should be definitely using this. So why use these recording methods? Now, there is only two reasons really. One is to thicken up the instrumentation, one is to add that sonic interest. Now, this has been developed from like 1950s, 1960s, 70s. Now, these guys here are the main players. These are the main people that made this happen. This is why I've kind of put this slide together. So Phil Spector coined this phrase, the wall of sound. And the idea with the wall of sound is to kind of get as many instruments as you can and layer them up like stringed instruments, brass instruments, and just keep layering up to get this massive thick texture. And then you plaster reverb over the top of them, and you literally get this idea of a wall of sound. Now, where that's coming from is before the 1960s, most studio engineers were restricted to 4 tracks. So having this idea of a wall of sound was almost impossible. You just couldn't achieve it. So when the 1960s, late 1960s come around, and all of a sudden you've got 8 tracks and 16 tracks, all of a sudden, I wonder what we can do with this. So what you were finding people doing is they were using, say, 14 of the tracks, and then they were bouncing them down to 2 because all they needed was stereo. So they'd bounce them down, and then they'd reuse the 14 tracks again and bounce them down to the next 2. So effectively getting maybe 100 tracks or whatever. Brian Wilson was an interesting one, but Brian Wilson's the producer and one of the singers for the Beach Boys. Now, it's widely documented that he's deaf in one ear. So when stereo came about, rather than doing what most people did and use the stereo field left and right, he still kept producing his recordings in mono, which basically gave him, earlier than everyone else, an extra track to play with and bounce down and add these layers. That's why on Pet Sounds you get these really lush textures where they've all been overdubbed and overlaid, and this idea of just keep doubling and keep building up these sounds. So that's really where it's come from. And obviously the birth of this gave birth to kind of more heavy rock and those kind of genres as well, because all of a sudden you could have these really massive lush thick textures, all within the recording console. So that was the idea of it. That's where it's come from. That's why we're desperately using it and kind of getting on with it in that way. So just to say who we've got here before we leave it. So Phil Spector is this guy down here. We've got Brian Wilson, who's this guy over here, and then we've got Sir George Martin, who was the producer for the Beatles. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. So the demonstration. Now we're just going to do a quick demonstration just to kind of show you how you can use ADT and double tracking. I'm going to apologize in advance because I've recorded a really shocking vocal and we're going to use that tonight. So I apologize in advance. Hope you like my singing. Should be a bit of fun. So just give me 2 seconds while we flip over to the demonstration page. It might just take me a couple of seconds just to do this. Hold on. All right, here we go. And hopefully we are live and you can see that and everything's good. So firstly, I've just set up a few tracks here. We'll come to double tracking in a second. Let's use this automatic double tracking at first. So this is an ADT. Now this is just an acoustic guitar from the Apple library here. I can't remember which one it is. It's this one it is. It doesn't matter. And so all I've done is just brought this in, and then I'm going to double track it. Now, let me just get my tools up here, just so I can show you what's going on. So let's just solo this one first, just show you what the original track is like. Make sure we're at our defaults, and we are. Good, good, good. Okay, so mostly uninteresting. It's just a normal rhythm guitar sound. Now, what I've done here is I've pressed Alt and I've dragged it down and I've created this second guitar, and it's exactly the same. Let me just show you that it's exactly the same, so there's no trickery going on here. Okay, so at the moment I've put this delay. Now this is where your ADT comes into it. Over here under this More tab you have these delay settings. Now this allows you to move it either forward going into the plus numbers or backwards going into the minus numbers. Let me just put it on 0 for now. So here's my delay setting, and we'll solo these two together. Just make sure we've got no panning on or anything like that. Okay, good. So here are the two tracks together, and once again, you will hear it slightly a thicker sound, but not massively. So yeah, you can hear this kind of boost in volume. So straight away, by doubling it and doing nothing to it, you get this increment in volume, which is very nice. So let's take this double tracking part here, and let's add this delay to it. So our automatic, we're going to just take it forward. Now, you'll see here the amount of milliseconds that you're going to move it forward. So a nice one to use is this 60 ticks or 31 milliseconds. That's a nice double tracking, okay, or automatic double tracking. Any more than that, you will start seeing it, and sometimes it's nice, sometimes it's not. So let's go radical first. Let's go 120 ticks, and let's see what you guys think of this. Okay, so obviously it's a bit too harsh, a bit too obvious, but let's leave it on that harshness for a minute. We'll come back in a second. Let's do the technique where we pan one left and pan one right and see what you think then, and see if you can identify this kind of bouncy effect that we're getting. So here we go. Here's our two tracks here. So one's hard left, one is hard right. Oops. There we go. That's a bit weird. One's 63 and one's 64. Never mind. Okay, so here we go. I mean, that's actually quite a nice effect, and it's giving you this kind of spatial awarenesses. It's a bit freaky, but it's okay. Now let's just bring that panning back to 0, and let's show you guys a less delay. So hold on a sec. So we're just going. There we go. So we'll just go less delay. This time we'll go to the optimal one, the one that I kind of like, which is this 20 clicks. It's not going to be as obvious. It's going to be very subtle, but it's going to give you that thickness that we're after. So you can hear that there's two guitars there. You can hear that they've been slightly delayed. Now let's put those hard panned left and hard panned right and see what you think. So that's a nice subtle effect, but it's giving you a bit of depth to your mix. Now that's quite a common practice. Okay, so we've looked at ADT, and that's really all there is to it. ADT, automatic double tracking, copy the part, offset the delay, and offset the I forgot the pitch. Okay, let's show you the pitch one. So we've done the delay, we've done the panning, but I didn't show you the pitch. Now this is one of the pitch shifts in Logic. So if you come down to pitch and you go pitch shift, you got this stereo. Now it's going to sound a bit weird on its own, but when you've got multiple tracks, you wouldn't notice this. But it is going to help thicken up the texture, a bit like synthesis does. When you tune your three oscillators, so you've got one that's a kind of one cent higher than the other or something, and you tune this thickness. We will get onto synthesis next term, but so it's going to sound a bit weird, but it's fine. It would work in the mix. You just have to be patient. So you've got a few settings here. First one is this mix setting, so you can actually tell it how much of the detuning you want to use. So we use 100%. Now you've got this cent. So remember, 100 cents in every semitone. Okay, so we certainly do not want to push it up 50 cents. But we will. Okay, now, and semitones, obviously, you have 12 semitones in every octave. So if you wanted to push it up a whole octave, we could, and we will. So let's do that now. Let's push up a whole octave, see what you guys think. bit weird. What we're really looking for here on the sense is you imagine your tape delay just slowing down or speeding up. You're looking at nothing really. 2 cents, you know, a really minor amount. So if you wanted to push it to 3, you could. So that's the detuning of it. It's not massive, it's just a little detune just to kind of add a little bit of depth to it also. That being said, that's pretty much all there is to ADT. Now let's move on to our double tracking and my lovely vocal. I've been dying to play you guys this. I need to start hiring a professional vocalist. That's what I need to do. Okay, not to worry. So let's select my first track. So here's my first double tracking. So there's some inadequacies with kind of phrasing and things like that that I wanted to bulk out and kind of work with. So you'll notice that each one of my different phrases, each one of my tracks is slightly differently phrased, okay? So here's the first one. Let's get rid of this massive silence at the beginning as well. I'm free, free falling. I'm free, free falling. So there's the first track on its own. Now this is where you're going to start hearing some kind of chorus effect. So here's the second one. And all I've done on these is I've just added a noise gate to clean up some of the hissy sounds. I've added a bit of DEs because my voice kind of needed it. And I've added just a normal compressor, okay, and just a little bit of reverb. So nothing major going on there. And it's the same with this track here. A little bit of reverb, nothing else. It's just all done with the magic of re-recording it. So let me play you the second track on its own. I'm free, free falling. You'll notice that these end of phrases are ever so slightly longer, just compensating for the fact that they weren't long in the first place. So here you go, have a listen to this. I'm free, free falling. I'm free, free falling. And already, just as a double track, you're already starting to hear that kind of chorusy effect. And I've gotten a little bit further on this second one. I've started to put some wobbles in. So sorry, on this third one. So you'll hear on these end of phrases, there's some extra wobbles on the actual free falling. Have a listen, see what you think. So this is triple tracking, as it were, and you could go even further, and then you'd start to blend them. So at the moment, my vocals are here, and I haven't really started to blend them, but we will do that as well. I'm free, free falling. I'm free, free falling. I'm free, free falling. So you have to decide which one should be your prominent one. And for me at the minute, this first one's working a lot better. And I just want to use these two just to accent some of the phrasing. So I'm just going to bring their volumes down ever so slightly. And what I might also do is you can't go hard panning on these ones. It would just sound weird. Let's do it. It'll sound weird. Let's do it. It's going to sound weird. So you shouldn't really do this. What I'm going to do eventually is just pan it out just ever so slightly. So just have a listen to this. See what you reckon. I'm free, free falling. That's cool. So let's now do it properly and just bring it in because it's all to reinforce that main vocal. So I'm just going to bring it +9 and -9. So just bring it in tight, but just give them a bit of space. And we've just brought these two extra ones down. So let's have a listen to that. I'm free, free falling. 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 Okay, so that kind of brings me to the end of that kind of demonstration. Now, as you can see, the real point of that was just to show you how easy it was, how easy and effective ADT and double tracking is. You should definitely be using it. You should definitely be expecting it. There's so many possibilities, and in modern DAWs, you can actually do it, and it's such a powerful feature. Okay, give me 2 seconds. Let's go back over to the presentation. Okay, we're almost there. So hopefully that was okay. Hopefully that's given you a real good insight of kind of where these effects have come from and how you can use them in your mix. And it's always important to know kind of who's using them first, so you can reference some of their tracks and stuff. So onto the Q&A. Once again, if you want to send us a question in, feel free to at Music Tech 101, or you can use the question answer panel or discussion panel here on Google Plus. Either is good. I'll check them all. One of the requests from last week was, can you just stay on slightly longer so I can actually get my question through? I hadn't had time to write it before you signed off, so I'll try and stay on a few extra minutes just so you guys can ask all your questions. That being said, we've had a few this week. So it says here, is it just me, or is this technique ridiculously effective and easy to use? Something this good shouldn't be this easy to achieve. And as you just saw there, absolutely. You can produce very professional quality recordings just double tracking, even if you don't have the most powerful voice or the most precise guitar playing technique or whatever. By using a bit of double tracking, you can definitely achieve something so much bigger than what maybe would have been possible. Um, so this is a good question. How much can I double track before it becomes overkill in my mix? Excuse me. Now, that is a good question because you look at the Wall of Sound and they were just using hundreds and hundreds of tracks to achieve these kind of massive, lush textures. So in their terms, actually, no amount. But in terms of a modern popular recording and everything having its place and everything being able to hear, you do track how much you overkill these sort of things. There is no right or wrong answer. Once you feel that it's gone the wrong way, start bringing it back. Will this technique score me extra marks for my task 1B? I added the 3B coursework. The answer is yes. Done well, you will definitely have an extra bit of polish to your mix. So you should definitely be using it. You should definitely be experimenting it, and you should add it to your production toolbox. At the end of the day, all of these little things that we've been going through this term, last term, they're all things that you can add to your toolbox, all things that now hopefully you've got a grasp of. You know they exist, and it's just a matter of experimenting, seeing what works well, and just adding it to your arsenal of things that you can use. Okay. So give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to check all the areas, see what questions we've got. So yeah, some really good questions this week. Really impressed by that. What do we have? Let me move this away from the mic because it's starting to fuzz a little bit. Okay, let me just go to that. Go to me Twitter first and see what we've got going on there. We've got 13 over on Twitter, so we should have some good ones there. And I'll just hang out for a sec. We'll go and have a look at the Q&A and see what we've got there as well. So we've had quite a few people on tonight, which is brilliant. Proving to be very popular, which is good. Okay, so we've got nothing there. What about there? Okay. Right, let's go to the discussion panel, see if we've got anything there. Let's go to the Q&A, see if we've got anything there. Okay, so it looks like it's all Twitter tonight. So any conversation you guys want to have, do it on Twitter and we'll hang out there for 5 minutes or so. Okay, so what we got? Okay, sorry guys, it's gonna always takes me a bit longer. Here we go. Okay, so Harvey here. So is there any point of manual double tracking and could you tell the difference? Absolutely. So manual double tracking is definitely a fantastic tool. And as we said there, it can eliminate some of those errors in your performance. So it's definitely worth doing. It's not it's not an obsolete tool at all by any means. There is a very obvious difference between automatic double tracking and double tracking. So both of them should be seen as completely different tools, and it's one of the reasons that I put both of them tools into this particular presentation, because I always kind of get this. Oh, what's the point? That's an old thing to do. I've got this modern door. Why can't I just do it with that? Because there's still an element to performance that you can't get from just automatically doing it. So that's why we do a lot of just normal double tracking. And as you can see there, that the double tracking will give you that kind of chorusy effect, whereas just automatic double tracking, it will give you that more of a delay effect. So it's different in so many ways, yet so similar. Okay, thank you, Harvey. That's fantastic. I've got another one here. Also, have you met Ken Townsend, the inventor of automatic double tracking? I have not, definitely not. I'd love to, of course. Fantastic. Harvey knows his stuff. This is what I like to see. Ken Townsend. That's right. Nice kid. Fantastic. I'm presuming that's Harvey as well. What have we got here then? Who's your fave Beatle? Who's my fave Beatle? Paul McCartney every single day. Also, I use ADT on vocals to really give it that retro vibe. Absolutely. Yeah, I love it. Like you say, and for me, I don't have a particularly strong vocal, so being able to employ something like that just gives you that little bit of an edge. So yeah, that's fantastic. Oh, that was from Tom, sorry. Another one, such a great song. Love Tom Petty. Absolutely fantastic. Oh, you guys are on it tonight. This is fantastic stuff. Okay, so linking back to last week, is there a way to link double tracking length to an LFO filter, and how would it sound? Oh, that's a good question. You could probably do something like that using tape delay. Now that's a really good question. The answer is I've not ever done it, so I'm not sure. I think now you've posted that, I might have a go at that for myself. So what you'd need to apply some kind of LFO to your audio track. You'd need to then route that LFO to a different track, a second track, so that you could push the audio signal to it as well. I'm not sure. Let me just flick over. You won't be able to see this, but let me just flick over to Logic and just see if there is an LFO all on its own. I'm just going to go through it because I've never, this is going to be awesome. Otherwise, if there isn't an LFO on its own, we're going to have to kind of use some kind of sampler or some kind of synthesizer to achieve that. Now, it doesn't look like we have just an LFO on its own. You can obviously use your modulation effects, but I don't think that's what you're kind of getting at there. You can obviously use modulation on double tracking. It's something we're going to do next week when we look at multi effects channels. So that should be an interesting one. So sorry, Ken Townsend, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll certainly have a little look at it. Yeah, and I will definitely give it a go. So I'm going to put that on my list of things to try out for next week's webinar. Okay. So you guys have been fantastic. I'm going to hang out for just one more minute, just so I give everyone a chance to kind of post in a question. Let's make sure we check all the different forums. While we do that, just to remind you guys that so next week is our last one in this series of effects. We're going to be looking at multi-channel effects processing. So we're going to try and bundle in as much of what we've gone through from distortion, delays, reverbs, modulation effects, double tracking, try and bundle them all into one and see how we can kind of use multiple effects on one channel to create this idea of a multi-effects channel. So rather than laying up a bus just so that it has one effect per bus, see if we can kind of manipulate these buses so they can do that much more. And it's quite a fun experiment actually, so it's going to be worth doing. In the meantime, Lots of new stuff coming out on musictechstudent.co.uk. This week we are looking at task 1C. So we're still developing our house track with Seven Nation Army. That's starting to look quite good. There's 7 tutorials for that one now. If you're an A2 student, we have a task 3C course, which also has about 7 tutorials, just showing you guys how to create or how to compose using technology. And we've gone through some nice, interesting things there to do with um, auto tune and things like that, and looking at different composing techniques. So, well worth checking out there. If you have any questions in the meantime about multi effects channels, or if you want to suggest next term's season of webinars, please let me know. Currently we're looking at doing synthesis, but if we have something very specific that you guys want us to do, we'll look at that. So, but our main goal is probably going to be synthesis followed by sampling. So it's going to be interesting, but we'll round it all off next week with multi effects channels. Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed that. That was fantastic. It's so much feedback from you guys, and I'll see you. Oops, I'll see you guys next week.